So we're going to talk about building applications faster and particularly building applications for your external customers, vendors, partners. There's a number of different types of users that use these applications from what we've seen from our own customers. And the reason why is, well, your customers, they need access to information and tools, and their expectations are pretty high, right? They want the things quickly. They want to take action. They want to see analytics or data. And if you ship products, for example, they want to see the order status and delivery tracking. Or if you want to provide a service, your customers typically want to check their usage, billing details, and account settings. Or if you're running a SaaS platform like a lot of our customers, your customers want access to their subscription status and account management tools. And what happens if they don't have these tools or dashboards with the information at their fingertips? They're often pinging your support teams, asking for data or asking to update their email, for example, or they might be complaining online about missing functionality. And a customer portal in this case can make your customers a lot happier, potentially reduce the support tickets that your team gets, and create a bunch of opportunities to find ways to increase revenue for your business. And I think we can all agree here. I think we'll have a poll going on too, which we'll love to learn more about is, building these customer facing tools and portals can take months. This is what we hear from a lot of our customers before they come on and try out Retool. The things that they're typically dealing with are an endless backlog. So your customers and businesses have a bunch of other feature requests that you have to get to, and your engineering resources are stretched thin, right? How do you decide what to prioritize? How quickly can you get those applications built? These are all questions that are top of mind. And what this means is that getting to market, testing features, launching features can take 3, 6, or even sometimes many more months to build and deploy. And every month that you delay here is blocking your ability to learn, figure out what's working, drive revenue, and retain customers. And then what we see over the long term is if you're building custom applications from scratch is your teams will start to have to manage the technical debt. They'll have to maintain their applications versus building new ones. And so that's where Retool comes in for those who are joining who may be unfamiliar. Just want to provide some context about Retool. We help a lot of companies. Some of our customers like Amazon, Taco Bell, OpenAI use Retool to build enterprise-grade apps. They do this a lot faster than traditional custom development. And these apps are web and native mobile apps, and they are for both internal or external users. For external users in this case, our customers typically build things like partner portals, analytics dashboards, and other vendor management tools. And the reason why they use Retool is because they can get much faster development speeds by dragging and dropping over 100 of our pre-built React components. They can also embed and import their own React custom components if needed. But basically, they can whip up intuitive UIs in minutes and iterate with their end users faster to be sure that what they're building is actually going to drive value for their customers. And they can connect to nearly any database or API to centralize information and remove data silos. We have a number of out-of-the-box integrations and a REST API for a lot of the other data sources that our customers connect to. And what sets Retool apart from a lot of platforms is that we are built for developers. We want to give developers the tools that they need to build highly custom, highly flexible applications. So, anytime when writing code is easier to get the job done or extend functionality, you can do that in Retool. And then finally, what a lot of DevOps teams, governance teams like about Retool is that it comes with the security layer out of the box with SSO, auditing, access controls, and a lot more. And you can also fit Retool into how you develop apps already with integrations with your source control provider, testing tools, debugging tools, monitoring tools, and a lot more. Well, what this all means is, you can clear that backlog. So instead of spending months thinking about building applications, you can start to launch them in weeks. You can get to market faster, and you can reduce those long-term maintenance costs. And I'm going to show you 2 examples of how our customers do this today. The first is Orange Theory. I don't know if anyone here has attended a Orange Theory workout or knows someone who has. But they're an awesome brand globally. They basically operate a franchise network of fitness studios that offer over 1 million members access to high intensity workouts, coaching assistance, and tools to like monitor their heart rate and a bunch of other interesting things so that they can analyze their members' success over time. And in this case, Orange Theory needed to enable their global franchise network with better tools to track and manage their members, report on sales, do a bunch of other things that needs to be done for their franchise around the world. And without the tooling, the studio managers lack the insights to understand and optimize what's working, right? How do we drive more members into our studios and see that they're actually coming back? How do we run promos for our members or new members to get them excited and get them to start attending more classes? There's a lot of questions that the team needed to get to and answer. But what was happening is that early on at Orange Theory, a team of around 30 engineers had spent several years actually building a CRM in-house to support their needs. This was a monolithic tech stack, made it very difficult to launch new features and iterate as they started growing to new territories across the world. So one of their goals was, hey, let's move away from building large traditional applications and let's try to replace some of the CRM functionality that we had built in-house with a suite of purpose-built apps. And that's where they came to Retool. What they did was pretty cool. They used Retool to rapidly develop and deploy critical internal and external apps. One of the apps is a lead and member management app, which basically allows studio owners to report on leads for the business. And also when members are joined and sign up, they're able to do a bunch of admin stuff to manage their members to make sure that they have success and they have the best experience possible with the brand. And they developed a number of other apps that the franchisees use today to get their work done. And the way they did this was they started by embedding some of their Retool apps into their existing portals, then eventually migrated to building an end-to-end white labeled portal in Retool. Basically, what this all means is that their franchisees can now self-serve their own performance data, generate promo codes, run campaigns, reach out to customers. Basically, they have the tools they need to make sure that their own business is a success. So at the end of the day, they're driving revenue. And what's really cool is that they were able to build, reportedly, these applications in a tenth of the time compared to traditional methods. And in this case, they only were working with 2 developers when they first started using Retool and built out these applications. So this supports a number of studios across the world for Orange Theory, and super excited about their story with Retool. The second example is with Teachable. Teachable is an online learning platform that enables creators to host and sell online courses. So imagine you're an enterprise customer of Teachable. You want to know, are your courses drive revenue, and split that by certain segments. Start to get those details around how am I doing with my courses? How can I do better? How can I optimize? These are the questions that their customers were asking. And in order to build analytics features for their enterprise customers, they actually estimated a 6-month timeline. When we were talking to their VP of engineering, he was mentioning that one of the things they considered was throwing more engineers at the problem, but what they realize is that only creates more bottlenecks. So it's helpful in their case to have a smaller team that's focused on building helpful applications. With Retool, they were able to test building this application live with their enterprise customers. They worked with a handful of beta customers to quickly assemble via drag and drop the interface, show the data, display the data, get feedback on live calls, and start to iterate towards building an actual useful app. One of the things that they saw was with Retool, they were achieving really fast development cycles. They were able to launch their enterprise analytics dashboard to beta customers within 4 weeks. And then after that, they scaled to over 1,000 customers by the second month. And at the end of the day, what they noticed is that they were able to unlock additional opportunities for revenue, which basically came from their ability to now upsell customers into enterprise, because this was a highly requested feature, even from other customers that were using Teachable. And also for their existing enterprise customers, they noticed a lot of customers just writing in about how happy they were with these tools, which means, happier customers, retained customers, good for the business. And we're really excited that Teachable is using Retool to power these features for their customers. I want to dive into the demo. Lucas will show you the demo, and basically the demo is going to cover how to externalize a Retool app. And in this case, we're going to be building a login screen and several other components. In the Q&A at the end, we'll go back into the live build and actually build live if you have questions pertaining to any of the parts of building. So definitely keep your questions coming in the Q&A chat, and we'll get to those in the live build session. So with that, I will stop sharing and we'll jump into the recording.
Hi, my name is Lucas. I'm a solutions engineer here at Retool, and I've worked with and helped customers design and architect external apps that are used by tens of thousands of users. And today I'm excited to share a demo with you all that shows how to launch customer-facing apps in hours, not months. Let's say we're a fintech company that offers streamlined and modernized financial services for our customers. As part of our promise, we're focused on delivering an exceptional user experience in all aspects of our customer interactions. Our new focus is on reimagining the lending experience, making loan applications and document management simpler, faster, and more transparent. Previously, the loan management process would involve extensive manual work from the operations team and a lot of disjointed back and forth with our customers over email, which resulted in longer approval processes, lowered CSAT scores, and increased customer churn, all of which have affected our bottom line. To provide more transparency for our customers and reduce our operational overhead, we decided to build a portal that would allow our customers to manage their loan applications and submitted documents, all from a central user interface. The main focus of today's demo is going to be on how you can externalize your Retool apps, bundle and brand them into a customer portal, and then create custom login and sign-up experiences for your users. As a sneak peek, let's take a look at what the final loan management portal looks like in Retool. As a customer, I can navigate to a custom domain that houses my login and sign-up screen that matches our company's branding, with no indication that the underlying portal was built in Retool. It's worth noting here that although our domain mentions Retool, we support setting custom domains for your instance, and we can remove any references of Retool in the URL. Here we see the login screen that we've configured with standard username and password, but Retool also supports different authentication methods, including SSO. Users can also sign up for access through this screen as well, which is what I want to do in this case. Here I'll go ahead and input my email, click sign up, and in a few seconds I should receive a sign up email. As you can see here, I've received my email invite for account creation, where I can then create a username and password for subsequent logins. Now, imagine a customer is logging back into this portal using the credentials they created after being prompted to sign up earlier. When I'm ready to begin the loan application process or view, update, or add new supporting documentation, I can log into the portal. Once I log in, I'm met with this loan application screen, where I can review the statuses of my submitted loan applications, as you can see here, create new applications by moving through a stepped workflow, and I can also view the status of my existing loan applications. So here, for example, I can see the loan status visualized, I can see any associated timelines with the loan, and I can also see some metadata associated with the application method. I can also navigate to the Document Center, where I can get insights into whether my supporting documentation meets all underwriting standards, or I can opt to upload a new document. Let's go under the hood and see how we built this end-to-end flow for our customers. Great. Now we're in the underlying Retool instance where we can apply some configurations to support our external portal. Let's also assume that we have the core applications built out for our portal, and our main goal is to externalize these apps for our customers. The first thing that we're going to want to do is to create a dedicated space in our Retool instance for our external apps and users. This will help us organize and separate our internal use cases from our customer-facing ones. To do that, we can use Retool Spaces, or an organizational feature that allows you to create multiple isolated Retool organizations on the same underlying Retool instance, allowing us to have a multi-tenant experience on a single Retool cloud or self-hosted instance. Each space has its own subdomain, SSO configuration, source control configuration, user accounts, and permission groups, along with unique elements like folders, apps, workflows, modules, queries, and resources. As an admin of this instance, I can navigate to my instance's settings, where I'll be able to manage spaces under the organization settings. From here, I can create a new space, which I'll call external. I can give it a short description, and then I'm prompted to give it a subdomain, which I'll want to give it the name external.demos.retool.com. For the purposes of this demo, I've already created a dedicated space for my external users, which I've given the same subdomain, external.demos.retool.com, as you can see. But just as a reminder, despite the fact that we do have to give it a subdomain, we can always set a custom domain for each individual space, which we'll touch on later. I can then optionally choose to copy the SSO and branding settings from my current organization or current space to my newly created space, but I'll leave those unchecked for now. Lastly, in the parent space or the admin space, we'll want to find our loan management application that we've already built out. And then we'll want to click this drop-down menu where we can select copy to space, with the destination space being the space that we just created. We'll then go ahead and copy the app and its dependencies. And now we've transferred the app to that space. It's worth calling out here that there are several ways to transfer apps, resource configurations, and other elements across spaces. You can either do it manually as seen here, or you can do it via the Retool admin API, which we'll touch on later in this demo. And finally, you can also sync these elements from space to space using your preferred Git-based source control provider. If we navigate now to our newly created external space, the first step that we're going to want to take is to enable external apps for our space. To do that, we'll want to navigate to Settings again, and then under Customization, we can access external apps. From here, we'll want to click Enable External Apps. We're then prompted by Retool to specify an internal domain list. Users whose email domains are outside of this list will automatically be placed in the external users permission group, which is the default permission group that Retool spins up for us once we've enabled external apps. The external users permission group is also the source of truth for how Retool differentiates external users from internal users. Here we'll just leave the internal domain list as retool.com. From there, Retool prompts us to configure our organization such that it follows best practices for externalizing apps. To quickly read through this list, Retool prompts us to brand our organization as we see fit by removing references to Retool, build custom apps to swap out default product pages like the login and reset password screens, and add a default theme. We'll get to those in a second. We're also prompted to create a landing page. A landing page is a designated Retool app that users in the external users permission group will automatically be routed to when they log in. In this case, I'll want to set our loan management app as the landing page, as that's the application that houses our loan and document management screens that I showed earlier. Let's double click into the external user permission group to take a closer look at permissions and how they relate to external use cases. As you can see, I can define app access, resource or data source access, and so on. If I click additional, I can also confirm that the loan management application is correctly set as my landing page. It's also worth noting that you can also create other permission groups to further control the level of access external users have. Navigating back to the settings page, the next step I want to take here is configuring branding for my external space. Under customization and branding, I can configure a variety of different branding settings, including uploading a logo and favicon, removing references to Retool, and I can configure a custom domain for my space to replace the existing subdomain. But Retool's branding goes beyond just swapping out logos and removing references. In the branding settings, we can also build custom Retool apps to replace login, reset password, invitation, and error pages. Here, we'll want to start with a custom login page. We can see a preview of the default login page below that comes out of the box. And when I click Manage, I'm then prompted to select an existing public app that I can set as my new login page in place of the default one. In this case, I don't have one, so go ahead and select Create a New App. We'll then give it a simple URL path segment, login. From here, our goal is to recreate the login page that I showed earlier, focusing first on the UI portion of the login screen. We're now in the Retool editing interface, where builders can quickly build UIs with our drag and drop builder and over 100 pre-built components. Editors can also write queries against their data sources here and extend their application logic with JavaScript and SQL, all from within the same editing interface. Since I created this login app from the branding settings, Retool also generated an out-of-the-box login form to quickly get me started. The first thing I want to do here is give our app a name. Here, login screen feels the most intuitive. Then we can navigate to the Settings tab on the left-hand side, where we can set some app-wide configurations. We've already given our app a shortened custom URL, so that's all set. The next thing we can do is set an app theme. Here I've already defined a fintech theme, so let me go ahead and select that. We already use this theme for our loan management application, so that feels appropriate for continuity. Themes are built at the instance or space level and then can be applied selectively within your applications. Once applied, your app will inherit the color palette, design elements, and typography that you've defined in the theme settings. From here, I'll want to tweak this form and add some functionality to match the login screen that I showed earlier. We can start by rearranging our components using the drag and drop interface. In our original login screen, we had the sign in with Google button located at the bottom, and similarly, our divider was also between the sign in and Google sign on buttons. Let's rearrange our components accordingly. From here, we'll want to add a link button that redirects users in case they forgot their password. To do so, let's navigate over to the left-hand side in the Component Creation tab specifically to grab a new link button component. Once we've dragged our new component onto the canvas, you can see that the component inspection panel opens up on the right-hand side. Here we can give our component a readable name and target all of its values and properties. For example, let's change the text value to forgot password. Once we've completed this login screen, our next step might be to build a custom reset password screen similar to this custom login screen and have this link button redirect our users there. For now, we'll leave this component as is. And for the sake of time, let's fast forward through the rest of the UI build to get it to parity with the login screen that I showed earlier. Great, now our user interface is in a good spot. I've set up a tabbed container, allowing my users to tab over from the sign-in form to the sign-up flow with ease. The next step is going to be configuring our queries, such that users can either authenticate through the login form or receive an invite through the sign-up form. We can start with authentication. We can navigate to the left-hand side of the editor, where we can find our query panel. This is where we can write queries that can read and write data back to all of our data sources. If I navigate to the sample query, I can specify a resource type tied to each individual query. And as a reminder, Retool can connect to all of these different data sources, from relational databases to NoSQL databases, and a variety of different third-party services. And if you don't see your integration reflected here, there's a good chance we can connect to it via our generic REST, GraphQL, and OpenAPI connectors. You can also write queries here using the out-of-the-box resources that Retool provides. One of these out-of-the-box resources are user actions. You might notice that this login query here came out of the box when I generated this login application, similar to the UI form. If I click into this query, you'll see that the resource type is a user action. The user action resource allows me to write queries in custom product page apps that enable users to perform actions tied to the Retool instance itself, including authenticating, resetting their password, or claiming an invitation. The user action resource can also retrieve a list of apps and folders for which the user has access to, as you can see here under action. Here, we'll want to keep login as the action of choice. We'll also want to keep email and password as the method, but we could optionally create a different user action that supports Google SSO or any SAML or OIDC SSO provider. Under the input fields, you'll see that we reference both email input and password input in double curly braces. In Retool, everything inside double curly braces evaluates to JavaScript. You can write these JavaScript snippets anywhere, including in query bodies, as you see here, in the component inspector, and so on. And just as a quick aside, Retool also supports writing larger blocks of JavaScript code via a JavaScript transformer or a JavaScript query. In this case, these double curly brace statements are referencing the input components, specifically the email and password inputs, from my login form. Here, everything looks good, so we can now configure a few optional settings for our query. Under run behavior, I'll want to keep this as manual so that it only runs when triggered by an event. In this case, the event will be a button click. And then I can also define a few event handlers that will fire upon a successful or failed query execution. Here I can modify this event handler such that on success, it will actually redirect me to the loan management application. So I can set an action here as go to app, and then the app in question will be the loan management application. Great, I'll hit save there. This is actually not a required step because, as you might remember, we set a landing page for the external user permission group where external users will land after authenticating. But the reason I'm setting this here is because my particular email is on the internal domain list, so I need it for testing purposes. Let's exit out of the query editor. And the final step here is going to be tying this sign-in button over to the query that we just edited. I can click into the form button, open the inspector, And then you can see that Retool has intuited that we want this sign in button to trigger the login query that we just wrote. I can click into this event handler so that you can see that on submission or on click of this button, we control a query, specifically the login query that we just wrote. That about wraps up the user authentication portion of the flow. Now let's handle sending invites to new signups. To send invites and create a user invitation in my Retool space, I'm going to rely on the Retool API. Let's navigate over to the signup form for a visual. The Retool Admin API is another out-of-the-box resource that allows builders and admins to programmatically manage different aspects of your Retool instances and spaces using API endpoints. As you can see from our API reference, we can manage everything from users, permission groups, spaces, resources, and so on. And the API serves a dual purpose. On the one hand, it allows for more programmatic management of your instance, but it also allows you to open up functionality such that your end user can hit these endpoints with guardrails that you define. For example, in our case, we want to hit the user invite endpoint when an end user clicks sign up specifically. This will effectively allow our users to self-serve their own sign-up flow without needing any manual intervention from our side. You can see from the API reference that the create a new user invite endpoint accepts two key parameters: the email of the invitee, and an array of group IDs that correspond to the IDs of the permission groups that you want to assign to said user. If we navigate back to the application, we can write a query that hits the user invites endpoint of our API. Here, we can navigate over to the query editor again, and then we can select create a new resource query, and then we'll specify the Retool API as our resource of choice. From there, we can define the operation as hitting the user invites endpoint, specifically a post request to the user invites endpoint. Under the email parameter, we can reference, again using our JavaScript syntax, the signup email value, and then we can add a parameter, in this case, the default group IDs. And then here, we're going to want to specify a single item array that references our external user's permission group. We can navigate to the permission settings to find our external user's permission group, and then we can select the dropdown here, copy the group ID, and then paste it into the query. Lastly, we can just give our query an intuitive name, like send invite, and then we can go ahead and save the query. And then similar to the sign-in flow, our last step is going to be tying the sign-up button to the query we just wrote. We can navigate to the sign-up button, open up the component inspector, and then configure an event handler here, such that on submission, we're going to control a query, specifically the query that we just wrote to the Retool API, the send invite query. Now users should be able to self-serve a sign-up through the portal. You might recall earlier in the demo that when I self-served my own email invitation, I received an email that looked something like this. It's fairly basic and it suits our needs, but what if we could take it a step further by creating a custom email invitation? Similar to custom product pages, Retool allows us to customize these events further via the branding settings of our space. If we navigate to the branding settings of our space, we can get a quick preview of the work that we've accomplished as it relates to the login screen. As you can see, our custom login page is now reflected in the settings UI. But beyond custom product pages, we can also modify email invites and events that originate from our Retool space. Here, for example, I can preview what email invites will look like by selecting user invite. You can see here that it matches the invite I received. If we want to take this a step further, I can create what's called a Retool event that will allow me to customize the user invite email. For some context, Retool events rely on Retool workflows to make the platform more scriptable and powerful, and you can use these events to override built-in Retool functionality like emails in this case. Essentially, Retool events allow admins to build custom automations in response to actions taken in Retool. Here under user invite, I can select manage, and then from there, I'll want to hit add workflow. From there, we'll land in the workflows editor, where Retool has pre-generated a user invite Retool event that I can tweak as I see fit. For some background context, Retool Workflows is the automation layer of the Retool platform. It allows you to create backend processes that can be initialized as needed or run automatically on a schedule, enabling you to delegate complex business logic to the backend. Common use cases include process automation, monitoring and alerting, data integration, and backend as a service. In this case, we're going to rely on the Workflows platform to run my user invite Retool event. Here, this workflow will automatically be triggered whenever a user is invited to your instance, whether manually or through the API. Retool also passes some context of the invitee, like their email and ID, to the workflow. And then you can configure the rest of the control flow as you see fit. The logical next step is to send an email to the invitee, either using Retool's managed email service or your own. You can fully customize the body and design of the email using HTML or Markdown, and you can remove references to Retool. We also recommend setting up appropriate alerts as error handlers, which we started doing here in case something goes wrong. Right now, our user invite flow is sufficient, so we'll focus our efforts on other areas of the portal, but we always have Retool events in our back pocket to customize not only the user invite email, but also the password reset and a few other emails as well. Let's go back to our login screen to test what the end-to-end flow would be like for our customers. We can swap out the editing URL with the public-facing one and then go through the flow. I'll input an email here so I can receive a sign-up link. After receiving the email and setting my username and password behind the scenes, I can then opt to log into the portal. I'll give this page a quick refresh to land on the login screen again, and then I can input my credentials as if I were a customer logging in to manage my loan applications and documents. And there you have it. After authenticating, we're met with our loan management application, and I can start moving through the functionality afforded to me through the portal. So in about 20 or so minutes, we as Retool builders and admins successfully externalized our loan and document management application, bundling it into a customer-facing portal. We started by spinning up an external space, acting as a dedicated sub-organization of my Retool instance for my external users and apps. We then configured the external users permission group and its landing page so that I can easily govern my external users. We then applied some custom branding and theming, such that the end-to-end flow was fully white-labeled, had no references to Retool, and matched my company's brand image. We then built out one of the many custom product pages that you can build, specifically the login and sign-up page, giving me a lot more control over the user journey. And finally, we touched on how Retool events can be used to customize, brand, and override built-in Retool functionality like user invites. There's a lot more functionality that we were only able to breeze over, like other custom product pages, other Retool events, and integrating SSO into your instance to manage users at scale. But all of this put together can really help you ship customer-facing apps and portals in a fraction of the time. So we're really excited to see what you build.
Jump into the Q&A portion now. We've invited Anthony Bello, who's a product manager on external apps. And I think one of the top questions we were getting was around pricing. And so Anthony, would love for you to cover, pricing and packaging. How should people think about this, especially when considering scaling to hundreds of users, for example?
Yeah, thanks, Nate, and thanks everyone for bearing with us on the recording. We have a lot of resources on YouTube actually already over the last couple of years that we can share out around kind of these build-alongs and some of the evolution of how external applications have supported our customers over the last couple of years, including Retool. So let me touch on pricing. You can build customer-facing applications on the business plan today. Folks were asking about Spaces and the Retool API. So Spaces is an enterprise-only feature, but it is not a requirement for you to build a customer-facing portal. You can just do so on the business plan today. You could set a custom domain, and the Retool API, specifically the user invite scope, is available on business. So you are able to kind of white label your invitations, those custom login screens, all on the business plan today. Regarding pricing, so an external user Retool is someone that doesn't match the email domain of the user signing up or creating the account. So you're able to modify the internal domain list for your organization, and then any user who joins is going to be billed as an external user. So there's a question, if you signed up with a Gmail domain, and someone else from your company or outside of your company is using Gmail domain, they will be considered an internal user. So you need to have a different domain for your external users. The way that pricing works today on the business plan is it is a tiered pricing model for external users. So if you go on our website or even on retool.com/external apps, you'll be able to see that the pricing is tiered up to 500 users on the business plan. And then past 500 users, you don't pay a cent for additional users. So this is to kind of give you predictability around pricing as you scale. And if you're kind of thinking about building your startup on Retool or getting to product market fit, we also have a Retool for Startups program that lets you get up to 60K in credits to go ahead and kind of build your application. So that should cover kind of the total cost of using Retool basically for these use cases. Happy to touch a little bit more on the structure for enterprise as well. So really the difference is, right, when you're kind of thinking about enterprise pricing is you have all the features needed to kind of take your applications to production. So the business plan is really for you all to get a sense of how to build external facing applications. The enterprise plan is really when you're kind of trying to take it truly to production with source control, with SSO, and kind of the workflows and white labeled emails as Lucas demonstrated in the demo. So we can kind of talk through more of that. We can reach out to you directly for folks who are asking around enterprise.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony. If you have any more questions on that, yeah, feel free to post in the chat. This question is about building. This question is for Lucas regarding authentication methods. What are the available user authentication methods for customer portals? And is there any role management for the external users too?
Yeah, great questions. So in the demo, we primarily covered username and password as the authentication method, which is a valid one. But we've gotten a lot of questions in the chat around using SSO, different SSO providers like Entra ID and Auth0. All of those can be used as well. Any SAML or IDC SSO provider is supported in Retool. And then to the question around like how do you actually implement that in the login screen, one of the methods that comes with the user action to log the user in is SAML or OIDC SSO providers.
Awesome. And the next one is also regarding building. Is there a way to embed spatial view data in Retool? If yes, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, also a good question. So likely yes. We don't have a spatial view component out of the box, but we do support bringing your own custom component into Retool, where you essentially develop your own React component locally, and then you can bring it into your Retool instance and drag and drop the component as if it were any of the sort of out of the box components that come in the component library.
Sweet. And I know one of the questions around adding custom domains, we get a lot of these requests from customers wanting to white label the entire experience. Can you touch on that a bit, Lucas, around, how to add custom domains? Is it possible to have portal subdomains without Retool in the URL?
Yes, we do support that. And let me actually just go ahead and share my screen so I can provide a visual here. So as I'm sharing my screen here, if you navigate to the branding settings of your instance or your space, under branding, you can see domain name is something that we can target. There we can set a custom domain for the space, effectively white labeling it, removing any sort of references to Retool in the domain itself. We didn't do that because we are Retool ourselves, but you absolutely can change that.
Sweet. Cool. Great questions. Keep them coming in if you have any more. We have a lot to cover here. So this person's asking, we don't have Retool right now, but we're interested in using Retool to create partner portal of current pages. Is that possible?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So actually, we have a YouTube video of how Retool built its partner portal using Retool applications. So all the applications and the demos that Lucas gave, all of those features that enabled our customers to build customer-facing application, Retool actually uses it ourselves. So we have our partner portal and our support portal actually both built in Retool, as well as Retool University. So if you want to sign up for those and check those out and sort of understand the quality of that software, that's all built in Retool. And we have a YouTube link that we can share out as well for how it was built. Basically the same as Lucas's demo as well.
Awesome. Yeah, let's definitely get those sent over in this follow-up comm. So you should also be getting those recordings after this presentation as well. This person's asking, what do we do if we want to develop external pages for multiple clients? Would we need spaces for each of those clients? And would they be required?
So spaces are an option if you have multiple clients, but it's not a necessity. It kind of depends on what kind of application you want to serve to these clients. If it's the same application, but just with conditional data, we oftentimes don't necessarily recommend spaces. Rather, we recommend using permission groups that represent those clients. From there, you can always reference the currently authenticated user using the current user object, using a JavaScript snippet in your apps. And from there, you can implement like row level security and pull in conditional data within the same application. Spaces is going to be great if you have net new applications for each of your clients and you want to keep them nicely separated and organized.
Great. And then this question, Lucas, this one might be for you. This person's asking, we have Retool applications. Can we migrate our current app setups into the new external app? So I think this person's asking, we have an internal Retool application. Is there a way to make that into an external application? And if so, can you provide some of that process as sort of we covered in the recording as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really common pattern we see where our customers want to expose some functionality of maybe their internal tools or some of their current tooling to their customers, or they just want to build a portal that allows their customers to self-serve certain actions. You absolutely can take an existing application and externalize it. Typically, what we see, right, and this is what the demo primarily covered, was you might want to spin up a space for those external users. And then you'll want to enable external apps and define that internal domain list such that anyone with a separate domain is kind of registered as that external user, is then placed into the external user permission group, and then you can build those permissions out from there. And then we'll start building things like custom product pages, so like a custom login screen, custom reset password screen, error pages, etc., giving your customers that very custom end-to-end experience. Basically, what we're doing is we're building a permission model such that customers go from login screen to the intended applications without ever seeing any references to Retool during the process.
Awesome. Is there a way to give external agents view access to specific apps and have them not count for the number of licenses available to our pricing? I think this was touched on in our pricing response, but Anthony, anything to add to that?
Yeah. So anyone who has a login or who is authenticated and has access to privileged data. So if you sign in with an email and that email is used to fetch information specific to you, you will be billed as a user. Retool has a feature called public applications on the business plan, where you can enable shareable links that are ideally meant to be used for a public use case where it's just public data that's available online. So our customers have built applications that show you fire stations on a map, or form submissions for textbook uploads or things like that. So really meant to be unauthenticated. So if you have that use case, public apps are great. If you're authenticating users, you should use Retool portals.
Great. This question is regarding design, right? Businesses want to match the brand of any application that they're building, match the design to their brand, fonts, colors, padding. So this person's asking, like, what's the level of customization I can have with the apps that I build with Retool? Is custom CSS possible?
Yeah, good question. So it is possible. We always recommend using the out-of-the-box theming as the first step, where you define a theme with a font families or multiple fonts and color palettes and other specific design aspects in the theme itself, and then apply it to the application. We actually also recently launched more of an advanced theming experience that allows you to more granularly control things like component level font weights, expanded typography controls, and things like that. But if theming doesn't meet your needs for any specific aspect of your design, you can always override the styling properties of the components and the Retool editor using custom CSS as well.
Great. Good question on design. This one is about setting specific alerts. So is there a way to set alerts for specific values that we receive through the data source? If so, what options do we have? Can we send an email, for example?
Yeah, good question. This is going to be a little bit custom depending on the specific use case. But typically when we see some sort of like automation layer, orchestration layer that sends, say, an email or a notification based off of like a change in one of your data sources or a user action from a Retool application, we can use Retool workflows, which is what we showed in the sort of back half of the demo there, which is, again, that orchestration layer where you can build control flows for your Retool instance.
Great. We're going to keep continuing on the questions. There was a number of questions we have still remaining, so we're going to be going to the hour probably answering some of these. The next question is regarding authentication. So Lucas, in the demo recording, you had built some authentication screens and login screens, for example. Are those templates? This person's asking, do we not have to build those from scratch? Like, what's the level of effort I need to build these login screens and add authentication?
Yeah, when you create a custom product page, Retool does generate a login form, like a basic login form, and then a user action tied to that login form out of the box. And this is true for the other custom product pages as well. From there, we keep the door open for whatever customization you all want, whether it's making a split pane like we had, or taking that login form and slotting it into some other UI form. So there is a degree of it being templatized, but a lot of it is also up to you and how you want to style it.
Awesome. And maybe this was in the application that you built, Lucas. This person's asking, how did you set up filtering data to the specific user?
Yeah, good question. We touched on this earlier. So this is going to be using the current user object. I can go ahead and share my screen again just to let folks know where that is in the editor. So if I share my screen here, you all can see a visual of the loan management application that was part of the demo. This is the editor's view. So whoever's building your Retool applications would see this. From there, if you all are familiar with Retool, right on the left-hand side is we're going to access all the different panels. One of those panels is going to be the state management panel. This allows you to see all of the different queries and the components within your application, also view their states, their properties, etc. But one of the global variables that's available to all builders in all applications is the current user object, where we can reference different metadata associated with the user, along with permission groups. And if you're using some sort of SSO provider, we can oftentimes reference the JWT, for example, that comes with said user. From there, we can reference the current user object inside of anywhere that accepts JavaScript in Retool using JavaScript's syntax, which is those double curly braces in Retool.
Sweet. Thanks for sharing your screen there and showing us how to do that. We got another question around, we have a copy. Basically, this person's asking, is it possible to embed an application into our developed app without requiring an additional login beyond the one already in place? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one part of this actually, we talked about white labeling Retool, getting rid of Retool's branding, having Retool manage the authentication, the users. There's also a way our customers build external facing applications by embedding apps inside of their existing tools. So we have a React and JavaScript SDK that let you embed Retool apps and authenticate users inside of them. So that is one way to use it. The whole external user definition still applies. We're happy to also share documentation on embedding apps. Now, regarding the team plan, this is only available on business and above regarding kind of external users. And although you can embed applications and use the React SDK on public-facing applications, using it in a way that authenticates the user is only possible in the business plan because you need permission groups.
Awesome. This person's asking, can the data visible in portals be stored outside Retool, or there must be a copy of the data within Retool? And how is CRUD access managed in the case of external data?
Yeah, great question. So in the vast majority of cases, Retool doesn't store any of your externally connected data, right? And so for the most part, Retool acts as a data processor, and the data sources that you integrate with are not storing that data. As for how CRUD access is managed in the case of external data, so you can very granularly affect controls and permissions within your applications. From a higher level, you can restrict which users can run queries against a specific data source if you want to prevent a large swath of users from running queries against that data source. But then more granularly in the application, using that current user object that I showed previously, we can restrict access for specific permission groups from executing a specific query or even clicking a button. And that extends to many different aspects of the app. We can hide portions of the application based off that current user as well.
All right, awesome. We're going to answer probably 2 more questions and then wrap up. This person's asking, do you have customers who build customer-facing apps in Retool, but only for front end? We have a web service that we would like to use for all database interactions and user authentication.
Yeah, I can go ahead and touch on that one. So the recently released feature that lets you build Retool applications as your login screen is really interesting for that exact reason. So you might want to check against an external system around whether or not a user, let's say, has an account in your database. And if so, you might want to log that user into Retool. And so this logic can be orchestrated through Retool applications, as Lucas had mentioned. So a lot of our customers, integrate Retool with SSO providers. Retool can also just manage the authentication for users, but you could also run this logic around user authentication as well through, the queries and resource connections that Retool has today. So we treat it as just any other resource, and then you're able to store, session tokens and things like that in the browser and use them in subsequent queries.
Sweet. And final question, let's wrap this up, is related to the other questions about external user visibility. are we able to associate a list of preset emails with a global filter in the app so that it only shows data tied to their organization? So I think this is tying back to user management and setting specific data tied to users in the organization.
Yeah, I think this is similar to Lucas's question, or the question that Lucas answered with row-level security, and basically making sure that user A can't see user B's data. So there's a couple of ways to do this. As Lucas mentioned, you can use what's called user attributes, which let you basically store arbitrary values on the current user accessing that application. Those values are not spoofable, so you can't just inspect a network query, change the value, and get other data. Retool kind of protects this by default. So if you imagine that you have, let's say, the user's location stored as a user attribute, and you might filter that in your queries, and you might then have a foreign key or primary key basically in your databases that would filter on that location and return data back specific to that user. So we'll have that kind of locked down on your behalf there too.
Awesome. All right. Well, just want to say thank you everyone for joining. That concludes today's presentation. As mentioned, we'll be sending the recording after so you can rewatch. And if you have any questions, want to get started, feel free to email me, nate@retool.com. And I posted some links. If you want to start building, if you want to get a demo, or if you want to read our docs, those are all available for you. So you can get started. But yeah, that concludes. Just want to say thank you for bearing with us with the recording, and we'll send that right after. So super excited to see what you all build with Retool. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.